Hello everyone, Hyper here, and welcome to the patch 8.0 Battle for Azeroth Frost Decay guide. In this video, I will go over talents for both single target and AoE, as well as stats, rotation, Enchants Gems that you will need to have to do competitive damage. What I will not go over is Azeroth traits and trinkets, because these will get buffed and nerfed through the first few weeks of the expansion, so pretty much anything that I would say in this video would get outdated probably within a few days. I will make a separate video where I talk about these closer to the release of Uldir, but in the meantime I will have a website pinned in the comments section where you can go to check daily sims for both trinkets and Azeroth pieces and Azeroth traits if you want to keep updated with what's currently best. But keep in mind that these are only sims, and in actual game setting, some of these might actually turn out to be better or worse than they sim. Let's jump into the guide and take a look at the single target talents. I will not be talking about any of the utility or defensive ones because those I will cover separately. First, we'll take Cold Heart. Then you can either take Horn of Winter or Runic Attenuation. Runic Attenuation is about 1% behind, but it takes much less micromanagement to play it correctly, so it might be the go-to for a lot of players. On the other hand, if you're looking to min-max, then you're probably going to want to play Horn of Winter. Then you take Frozen Pulse, Gathering Storm, and Breath of Sindragosa. This build will be very good on single target and any cleave fights. However, if you have more than 2 targets, then you're probably going to want to swap out Frozen Pulse for Frost Sight. Next, moving on to AoE. And when I say AoE, I actually mean more than 4 targets, because up to pretty much 4 targets, so 3 targets and below, Breath of Sindragosa build will be the top build you should go with, and that will provide you with the most damage. But if you're looking at getting more AoE damage, so big dungeon pulls for example, then you should move to this other build. First, we'll take Inexorable Assault. Then in tier 2, all of the talents are within about 1.5% of each other, so you can go with any one of them depending on which one you prefer. I personally like taking Murderous Efficiency, and this is the highest output talent by a tiny little margin. Then we'll take Frost Sight, which is an extremely good talent in AoE, and on big pulls this will be basically your top damage. Then Glacial Advance or Frostworm's Fury, depending on what type of damage you want. If you are doing a dungeon and your tank is doing small pulls, then Glacial Advance will be better. If you have a tank who picks up a third of the dungeon at a time, then obviously Dragon will be better, because you can get the huge burst AoE out of it. In the last row, I prefer taking Obliteration, but if you happen to take Dragon instead of GA, in that case, you can actually make an argument for Breath of Sindragosa, because this will give you more boss damage throughout the dungeon. So again, with Frost Decay for AoE, we have quite a few choices, and most of the talents end up being situational rather than a cookie cutter build. Taking a look at the utility talents in the 58 row, first of all, we have Death's Reach. And this, just like for Unholy Decay, is good for leveling, or if there's multiple caster mobs that maybe your group doesn't have enough interrupts to just constantly kick and get them into the melee range. So you can grip one in, and then as soon as it dies you grip the next one, because you will get that reset on your death grip. And it also increases the range of your death grip. So that is a very nice little utility that's added that is often overlooked, because our death grip by default is a 30-yard range. With this, obviously, it will be a 40-yard range. And that little extra range might actually save you in some situations. For example, if there's a caster about to get a cast off, you won't have to move as far out of melee range to get him in because of that added range. Then we have Asphyxiate. This is probably my go-to talent for situations where either other people in my dungeon group don't have stuns, or we are kind of in need of some sort of single target crowd control ability. The third talent here is Blinding Sleet, which is a decent talent in Mythic Plus if you want to get mass interrupts in with this Disorient. But other than that, this talent doesn't really have much use if you're raiding or doing outdoor content. But in Mythic Plus, it will definitely be situations where you will pick this talent, especially if you're doing big pulls that have several caster mobs in them. And then taking a look at our level 75 row, which is our survival / mobility row. I recommend taking Permafrost, especially early in the expansion, where this will actually give you quite a nice shield and is just little extra defensive, passive utility that you don't have to worry about, but it's always there. Wraithwalk on farm content, once you actually don't have to worry about surviving, this will be just added mobility to our spec, so overall a good talent. Death Pact, just like for Unholy, I don't like playing Death Pact really because most of the time you can either prevent the damage from coming in with either your AMS or your IBF, so reacting to damage in most situations is not as good as being proactive about taking damage. So the other two talents in this row I believe are just better overall, and I don't really see myself running Death Pact pretty much ever unless there is a very specific situation that requires it. Next, let's take a look at the stats. Luckily for Frost DK, the AoE and the single target stats are essentially the same priority, unlike Unholy. So on single target, you will want to go with Mastery over Critical Strike, over Haste, which is equal to Versatility. So Haste and Verse are kind of the lowest stats that you kind of want to avoid as much as possible. And then Mastery obviously buffs most of our abilities because they do deal frost damage, like Breath of Sindragosa for example. And then on AoE, this stat priority is essentially the same, where we want to take Mastery as our first stat, then Critical Strike, then Haste, and then Versatility. So the only thing that changes here is that Haste is slightly better than Versatility on AoE. And again, Mastery just buffs all of our abilities, and most notably here, it will buff our Rhyme procs, and it buffs our Glacial Advance and Frostside. So these three are huge AoE damage abilities, and having them buffed by our Mastery is actually a very, very nice benefit. Our primary stat is obviously Strength, and early in the expansion, when you're still kind of low on your primary stat, Strength will most likely win out over secondary stats. So this means that, for example, if you get a 10 eye level upgrade, but it maybe doesn't have your best stats on it, it might still be an upgrade. And to actually figure out exactly which items are upgrades and which aren't, I definitely recommend simming your own character on a website like Raidbots or just downloading SimCraft and running your own sim, because this will give you a much more accurate idea of what your character's stats requirements are, because obviously your stat priority will fluctuate slightly depending on the stats you have. Next, let's take a look at the rotation for single target. The opener I will mention separately because this will essentially be the exact same every time you pull a boss. So our basic opener is obviously pre-pot right before the boss, and then run in with Remorseless Winter when the timer hits 0. Then you will want to get 2 Obliterates in and press your Empower Rune weapon. After that you will Pillar of Frost and Breath of Sindragosa. So that is the order you want to press your cooldowns in. Again, Empower Rune weapon, into Pillar of Frost, into Breath of Sindragosa. After your opener, your rotation will be a spell priority. First of all, your highest priority is always using Chains of Ice when you're at 20 stacks and you're getting to the end of your Pillar of Frost. So Pillar of Frost in BFA actually gives you increasing benefits based on the number of runes you spend during it. And this means that right before it's about to run out will be when you're getting the highest benefit from it. The only exception to this is if you have an Unholy Strength proc that is about to run out before your Pillar of Frost runs out. So for example, if my Unholy Strength is procced, and I have about 5 seconds on my Pillar of Frost still, but my buff of Unholy Strength is about to run out, then I will go ahead and just use my Chains of Ice anyway. Second, you want to always Horn of Winter when you're below 2 active runes. So this means that you have at least 4 of them recharging. Obviously, if you happen to take RA, then you completely ignore this step. Then you always want to cast Howling Blast with your Rhyme proc. Then you always want to Obliterate with Killing Machine proc. You always want to Remorseless Winter whenever it's off cooldown. And then if you have nothing else, then you just Obliterate. And then your very lowest priority is Frost Striking. Obviously, you're never going to do this during Breath of Sindragosa. One kind of exception to this overall spell priority list is that if your Breath of Sindragosa is active and you're about to run out of runic power, then you will prioritize runic power generating abilities like Obliterate, for example, or Remorseless Winter above anything else, because you want to maintain that uptime on your Breath of Sindragosa for as long as possible. Moving on to the AoE rotation, and for this I will be assuming that you're using my AoE build with Glacial Advance. The highest priority ability is always Glacial Advance, and you want to press this whenever it's off cooldown. These two abilities are just kind of maintenance abilities that you just want to press whenever they're available. Then you want to Frostbite with KM procs, and then Howling Blast with Rime procs. And then below that, you want to Obliterate if you're about to cap runes. So one weird thing about this build is that oftentimes you will find yourself actually about to cap on runes. So you're essentially just GCD locked and you're not able to spend all of your runes if you're just spamming Frostbite and then you're using up your Howling Blast procs and pressing Glacial Advance on cooldown. And this is because you're only really spending one rune per global cooldown, and then whenever you gain those Rime procs, you are not really spending a rune. So you're going to be regenerating your runes faster than you're able to spend them. With the AoE rotation, I never suggest Frost Striking. It is actually a DPS loss to Frost Strike, even if you're capped on runic power. So you just only want to spend your runic power on Glacial Advance and nothing else. For AoE, I didn't really mention Pillar of Frost or Empowered Rune Weapon, but essentially you always want to keep these on cooldown. You always want to use them to gain the most benefit. And typically you want to press your Empowered Rune Weapon before your Pillar of Frost, just like you do on single target. And then you just use it whenever it's coming off cooldown. Moving on to Enchants and Gems. As a Death Knight, we actually save a lot of money on enchanting. Your main hand weapon you will want to enchant with Rune of Razor Eyes, then your offhand with Rune of the Fallen Crusader. On your ring, you will want to enchant Pact of Mastery, and as far as gems go, you will want to have one Kraken's Eye of Strength, because this is a unique gem that you can only have one of in your gear, and then for the rest, you will just want to gem them with Masterful Tidal Amethysts. Thank you so much for watching the Frost Death Knight guide, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section. I am more than happy to help you out. If you're interested in importing my UI, make sure to check out my UI video or just go to the spreadsheet that is linked in the comments section. And as always, if you want to support this channel directly and in the process have early access to guides like this one or join my Discord, then make sure to check out my Patreon. Again guys, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you on the next one.